Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, grandpa and grandmas. I am uploading consistently and I don't know where I am getting this time from. So today we are going to be looking at drill down, if not drill through. I still cannot get the difference. Of one chart to another, data visualization. Who could tell that I could be doing data visualization? But I had this challenge of creating a chart where someone could drill down to show another visualization based on a section of another visualization. And I could do it in Power BI and Tableau, but while using Plotly Dash, I could not. And after going through the internet for 1 minute, I was able to get a piece of code that helped me solve the problem. And this piece of code is what I'm going to take you through today. And without yapping a lot, let's go to code. So here I have my terminal open, and in this terminal, I have a virtual environment activated, and in this virtual environment, I have my packages installed. And the package that we are going to use is Dash. So if we look at the packages installed using pip freeze and making this terminal bigger, we are seeing that I have Dash installed, and Dash comes with lots of these other dependencies. And I also have Dash Bootstrap components installed. The rest of these dependencies come with the Dash or Dash Bootstrap components. And I'm inside a folder called source, and inside this source, I have a file called main. So you can launch your IDE. You can also install the packages in the virtual environment, and the packages you're going to install will be Dash this version if you want to code with me anyway. Or if you just want to see, you'll know that this is the package that I'm using. So let's go to our VS Code. I'm using VS Code as the IDE here. I'm going to make it bigger. Then I'm going to build the chart. I also need pandas. There is also pandas installed here, just so you know. Yeah, so let's get to code. So what we need here is Dash. So we're going to import Dash. Then we're going to import Dash for components. So import from Dash, import DCC. So this will have Dash core components. Then I need Dash Bootstrap components. So the core components contains mostly web components like drop-downs that help someone to interact with the web. And then Bootstrap components will help with the styling of our site. So we're going to import Dash Bootstrap components as DBC. Then we're going to, for Dash, it uses both input and output for the callable functions. And those functions the function that we're going to be working with, the callback functions, will need the inputs and the output objects or functions. So we're going to import Dash, from Dash I mean the dependencies. We're going to import output and input. Then we are working with the data visualization. That means we need a package for visualization. So I'm going to import Plotly. So we're working with Plotly. So import plotly.express as px. So this is just Plotly Express. Then since we're working with data, we're going to be handling data using pandas. As PD. So these are the dependencies that we're going to use for this mini project. So let's define our app object should be dash dot dash, and this is enough to define our app, but we want it to fire when we call the file, and we also need it to use external style sheets. So external style sheets, and the external style sheet we're going to use is Bootstrap from dash bootstrap components, and the theme should be Bootstrap. Bootstrap. Then we need our data. So I'm going to use dummy data, and the data I'm going to just fetch it here. We're going to create our dummy data from here. So this is just a dummy data, and I'm going to paste it here. So the data contains data about vendors. So that those could be Vans, Nike, Adidas, I don't know how to pronounce that, and what they sell, the products that they are selling, t-shirts, sneakers, caps, clothing, and so forth. Then the number of units sold. So this is going to be our data, and we are going to convert it into a data frame. Then after that, we are going to plot the main chart. So we're going to define sales plot. So this sales plot is going to be a pie chart. So we're going to calculate the categories and the quantity of units sold in a particular category. And the pie chart that we're going to build here will be the pie chart of vendors. So product sales df dot group by. So group by is just an aggregating function, and we are grouping by vendors. And what we are using to group the function itself is sum. So we're going to sum, and what we are summing will be these values here. Then we reset index so that we have a totally new data frame. So our figure, as we're building our figure, will be a plotly express pie chart, so dot pie, and the data is df, the one that we've just made, and the names or the categories in the pie chart. So the names will be vendors, and the values will be units sold, and we want it to be anyway, I like donut charts, so I'm going to have make it have a hole, which is a radius of 0.4. Then we are going to give it a title, so I'm going to update layout. So the figure that we have defined dot update layout, and the layout, the title is going to be let me call it sales distribution. I also want it to use a presentation template. And that is our figure defined, so we can just return figure. Then from here, we are going to create the layout for our web. Remember, Dash helps us to create a web pages with visualization, so that it looks like a dashboard. And for that, you need to like have some bit of web design to know how to work with containers, cards, and the other components that web designers work with. So we're going to define the layout. So app.layout. The layout of our web page is what we're going to define here. So it will be dash bootstrap component dbc dot container. So it's going to be container, and in this container we are going to contain, the first thing will be a card. So dbc dot card, and inside this card I'm going to have a button. So the button that I'm defining here will be the button that will help to go back when we drill down. So when you click the pie chart, it will show you a different chart inside drilling down. But when you want to go up, there should be something that will help you to go back up. And I'm going to use a button. So it's going to be dbc dot button and I want the text on the button to be back. I want the color of the button to be dark. Dark. And I want to give the button an ID, not a class. So the ID, I'm going to call it back button. Then I want it to be outlined. So outline should be true. And these other ones are just the size, just more bootstrap stuff now. Small screen, that is the screen size. Then class name should be camel case. Class name, I want it to be, so the margin top 2. Then margin left also 2. And I want it to take only one column. So let me break this down from here so that it is readable. So that is my button. And I want this button to have a style which I can be playing with. So that when you're on the main page, you don't see it, and then when you drill down, you see it. So I'm going to have a style here of display, and the display for now it's going to be none because we're on the main page, but we're going to send back an output from our callback function, and from that output we're going to display block so that it can show. So the next thing we're going to have is a row. So here we have a button. Hopefully I am not missing anything. I want this to be indented so that we know it is inside there. So we're going to have dbc.button. Button is uppercase B. And I mean, we already have a button. I'm sorry, I'm saying dbc.row. And in this row is where we're going to put the graph. So we're going to have the graph is like an interactive component. So dash component dot graph, and we are also going to give an identifier. So ID equals to graph. Right. Then the figure of this graph is going to be what is returned by the sales pie or the sales plot. So I'm going to have figure being equal to sales plot, whatever we return there. Right, and this is going to be our chart. So we're going to have a styling for the row, and what I want is the chart to be in the center. So we're going to justify, and we're going to justify it to be in the center. Right, so we have a button and a row, and this row here contains the graph. And now we're going to, I'm going to have this card here. I'm just going to give it a padding, a margin on top of on top of it. So we're going to have class name, and I'm going to give it margin top 3. And this is how our layout is going to look like. The next thing we're going to do now is to define the callback function. So I'm going to, it is a decorator on top of the function. So here's going to be our callback at up dot callback. So we define the decorator, and the decorator here we're going to define the inputs and the outputs of that function. So our output, our first output is a graph. We're going to return the graph that is drilled in, the graph, and it is of a form of a figure. Then the second item is also an output, and what we're going to output here is a back button. We are outputting to, so here you see here, this is ID graph. So what we are outputting here is of the ID graph, and what we're going to output is a figure. And then, so that means that inside the callback, we're going to return a figure. It could be this kind of a figure, or I mean this kind of a figure, or it could be any other figure that we're going to do. And then the second thing is that what we are going to return to this ID here, back button. And what we are going to return into back button will be this display. So we're going to return this tile. Voila. Then what else? I see an error here, and I don't know why I have an error there, but we shall figure out why in Yep, so the error here is it is expecting a function. Yeah, since this is a callback, it is a decorator. It means that it needs to decorate a function. We shall define that function later. So let's continue. The third item here is going to be an input. So what the callback function will be inputting, and the first one will be graph. So it will be picking information from this ID, this graph here, and the information that it's going to pick will be click data. So the data that was clicked on, and from there, if we have click data, we can easily manipulate the click data to to filter the data that was clicked on from the pie chart and return the figure that needs to be returned here. Then the next information that we're going to pick will be an input, which we may not use, but let me just have it here. So we are getting an input from the back button. This back button here. And the information is just the number of clicks, which again, I'm saying that we may not use. So let's define the function here. I'm going to call it drill down. And the drill down, we are expecting two inputs, this input and this input. So I'm going to have click data. And the number of clicks. So we have that function. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the context of the callback, and from that context of the callback we can get what triggered the callback. So if the callback was triggered by by a click on a graph, then we can continue with our computation. So I'm going to have my context here, ctx as my context. It's going to be dash dot callback context, callback context. From here we can get the trigger ID. So trigger ID, what triggered the callback. So if if the item that triggered the callback is a graph item, and the click data, this is click, the click data is not empty, then let me call this is click. Then we know that someone clicked on the graph. So ctx.triggered. If you look at this information, you'll find that here we have triggered, and then the first information will have prop ID, and the prop ID will have graph dot something. So what I'm going to do is pick the prop ID from here. Then I'm going to split it because it is a string that has a full stop inside. So let's split. And I'm going to split it on the dot. And I pick the first value. So that first value will be graph, will be the ID that caused the callback. So if it was just a back button that was clicked, then what will be returned here will be this back button ID. But if it is a graph that was clicked, then what will be returned will be the graph. The graph as the ID. So now that we have this, we are going to check if the trigger ID is not, or if it is graph, I mean. If it is graph, then we need to get the vendor name for the graph that was clicked. I think by the end of this, you will have a clear vision of what is happening. So if it is that, then we're going to look for the vendor name. But before we get the vendor name, the graph may have been clicked on any position that is not the vendor name, maybe around the hole or on the edges. So the first thing we need to know to make sure is that click data is not empty, because when you click on the part of the pie chart, it returns a click data. So we're going to say if click data is not none. So if it is not none, we are sure that part of the graph that contains the data was clicked. Then we can now fetch the vendor. So vendor is going to be click data. Then the point that was clicked. So we're going to fetch the point. And we just need the first one. There could be so many points that were clicked. And then the label of that part. So the label. Remember that when we plotted the chart here, we have the names and the values. But when the pie chart is displayed on your screen, these names are the labels. So what we're going to fetch here is the label, and that label is the vendor. So we're going to check, before we plot, we're going to check if the vendor exists in the list of vendors here in our data frame. So this data frame here contains this list of vendors. So we have to make sure that the value that was returned here, this is just like a second check, to make sure that the value that is returned here is part of the vendors, because we may start filtering data that does not exist among the vendors. So we're going to check if vendor in product sales data frame, and then product sales data frame dot vendors, or you could just, let me do it the normal way, because this may look like a function. Let me just put here vendors, then dot unique. So if it is part of that, then now we can start filtering. So we can call it vendor sales data frame. And vendor sales data frame is going to be product sales data frame. And we need to filter the product sales data frame with the values of the vendors being equal to the vendor. So vendors equal to this vendor here. So now that we have the data frame containing vendors, a particular vendor that we have selected. For example, if in the pie chart you clicked on the Nike, the data that will be in this data frame will be only Nike data. So now we can plot our chart. So we're going to have our figure being equal to, so now instead of plotting, you could plot any other thing. I'm going to plot a bar. So plotly express.bar. And then the data is this. And the X values are going to be the products, and then the Y values are units sold. Yeah. So that is our chart. We're going to do the same as the same thing that we did with the pie chart that we defined here. And that is just updating the layout. So we're going to do figure.update. I'm going to copy this. I don't know why it is not auto-completing. There could be something wrong somewhere with the code, but we shall debug after completing. So this, and then I'm going to just be a bit fancy here with my title. So my title here is going to be it's going to be an F string, and also I'm going to do some bit of HTML here. So I'll make it bold, and the value that is passed here will be a bold value. Then, so the value will be like Nike product sales. And the value that we're going to pass here will be vendor, this vendor here. Right, then we are also going to show legends. We don't want legends. I'm going to just put show legend. And I make it false. Then the same thing as the other templating for the other chart. And the template is going to be presentation. Template equals to presentation. Then after that, we're just going to return figure, or fig, fig. And then after returning, so we are returning the chart. And when we return this chart, remember in the callback here, we say that the first thing we are returning is, we're returning it to the ID of graph, and we're returning the figure. So what will happen is, when we return it from the callback function to this ID, this figure value of this graph will be updated to this fig. Then the next thing that we say that we're going to return is the style, and the style will be this dictionary that we're going to return. When we return this value of a drill down, so we're going to return also this to be block. So the styling is block, or the display is block, and that will show the back button. So if none of this condition is passed, we return the chart as usual. So if you just click anywhere, or you click somewhere where there is no data, we return our usual sales plot. And we also return the display. But here the display is none, because we are showing the display of that back button is none. We don't want to show it because we are showing the pie chart. And that is how I implemented this. And also, just so you know, this is not my code. The link to the original source of this code is in the description. There is a Stack Overflow page or question that someone answered with this, and there is also in the forum of Dash community where this code is from. So you'll find it also in the description, and you can go and check them out and give them the recognition that they deserve. So let me just make sure that this can run in the terminal when I call it. So if name equals to main, we do app dot run server. And if you're still working with this file and you're building a full dashboard, then you can put your debug equals to true, debug equals to true, and we are done. So this is our file, and it seems everything is okay by now. So what we're going to do now is to run this file in terminal. Clear here. When you list, we can see that. So main Python main.py, run this. Hopefully there is no error. seems that there is no error, and we can now access our chat from this link. So I'm going to try to get a browser window somewhere here, and I bring it there. So we're here, paste, enter. It doesn't look the best of charts or the best of visuals in the world, but when I click here, you can now see we are seeing Nike product sales, and our back button that I was talking about is here. If I click here, this is Vans, this is, I don't know that, this is Adidas. Let me click Adidas. We can see the accessory product here. Yep, so that is what I wanted to share with you this week. If you have learned something, or if you have entertained yourself looking at me coding, please leave a like, consider subscribing. I do lots of data science and data engineering here. For all my African friends and someone who is not in African, have peace. Until next time, see you later.